Welcome to HardScript.
Help me reach 5,000 subscribers. Support the video with a like and leave your thoughts in the comments. She stood in the middle of the living room, her arms crossed, eyes sharp enough to cut through the silence. The candle on the table burned low, a small flame between two people who hadn't felt warmth in weeks. She said it like a confession, calm, deliberate, final. I need space. You're suffocating me. The words didn't hit all at once. They sank in slowly, like ice melting down the back of my neck. For a moment, I thought she was joking. Just another one of her emotional tests, the kind she loved to run when she felt me slipping out of orbit. But the look in her eyes said otherwise. I didn't argue. I didn't plead. I just nodded and said, "Take all the space you need. I won't be there when you come back." Her face shifted, surprise first, then confusion. She was used to control, to seeing me break, explain, beg. But this time, there was nothing to control. I walked past her, grabbed my jacket, and left the house without another word. Outside, the night was cold, heavy with rain. I climbed into my Ford F-150 and just sat there for a minute, watching the raindrops slide down the windshield. The silence inside the cab felt cleaner than any conversation we'd had in months. I started the engine and drove without direction, the kind of drive where the road becomes therapy. We'd been together for 5 years, married for 2. Somewhere between "I love you" and "I need space," she'd stopped seeing me as a person and started seeing me as pressure. Every gesture, a text, a question, a touch, became a reminder of how distant she already was. She said she felt trapped, but she was the one who built the walls. I stopped at a 24-hour Walmart just outside town and wandered the aisles, not looking for anything, just trying to feel invisible. Couples passed by, laughing over snacks and late-night errands, and for the first time, I realized how long it had been since I'd laughed with her. When I finally got back to the truck, I opened the Notes app on my phone and typed one line. Love dies the moment it starts feeling like obligation. By the time I pulled into a cheap motel on the highway, I knew this wasn't a fight. It was a finish line. She wanted space, and I was done being the air she kept choking on. The first night away from her felt strange, not painful, just empty in a way that was almost peaceful. The motel room smelled like bleach and cigarette smoke, the kind of place no one stays long enough to leave memories. I lay on the bed staring at the cracked ceiling, listening to the rain hit the window, and realized how quiet life gets when the wrong person stops talking. In the morning, I drove to a diner near the highway. The waitress poured me black coffee without asking. She looked like she'd seen 1,000 versions of my face before, men running from something they didn't know how to fix. I sat by the window, phone face down, and just watched the world move without me. By noon, the messages started coming in. First from her, then from her sister, then from a mutual friend who said she just needs time. That phrase, "needs time," used to sound like hope. Now it sounded like delay, like she was buying herself emotional distance with borrowed empathy. I didn't respond. I didn't even open the messages. I knew how it worked with her. She'd push, I'd pull, she'd retreat, and I'd chase. Not this time. This time I wasn't playing the rescuer. I spent the day driving through back roads, letting the miles erase the noise. Somewhere around sunset, I stopped at a gas station, grabbed a cold Coke, and leaned against the hood of the car. The air smelled like rain and asphalt. For a moment, I thought about her, sitting in our house, maybe replaying our last conversation, maybe not. I remembered the look she gave me when I said I wouldn't be there when she came back. It wasn't anger. It was disbelief. She'd never imagined a version of me that didn't orbit around her gravity. She thought I'd always wait, that I'd always be available whenever she decided she missed the warmth she kept pushing away. That night, I checked into another motel farther down the coast. I wrote in my notebook, "Sometimes they don't want space. They just want to see if you'll beg to stay close." For the first time in years, I didn't feel the urge to explain myself. I didn't feel guilty. I just felt distance, clean, necessary, earned. And somewhere between the silence and the sea air, I realized this wasn't loss. It was freedom disguised as heartbreak. 3 days passed before she called. I didn't answer. I just watched her name flicker on the screen, the same way a dying light flickers before it goes out completely. She left a voicemail, calm, measured, pretending not to care. She said she just wanted to check in, that she hoped I was taking care of myself. It sounded rehearsed, like someone trying to convince themselves they still had control. I deleted it without listening to the rest. That was her game. Stay distant enough to look innocent, close enough to stay relevant. She wanted to test if I still existed in the space she demanded. That night, I drove into the city. The neon lights felt louder than usual, like everything was alive except me. I stopped at a Starbucks, ordered coffee I didn't need, and sat by the window watching strangers pass. Everyone looked like they had somewhere to be. I didn't. And for the first time, I wasn't ashamed of that. I thought about the years we'd spent together, how she used to smile when I'd surprise her after work, how that same smile eventually turned into a sigh. She said I was too much, that my care felt like pressure. But what she called suffocating, I called love. What she called space, I called distance. When I got back to the car, there was another text waiting. We should talk. I didn't mean it the way it sounded. I almost laughed. There's always a follow-up when they realize silence doesn't chase. I put the phone in the glove compartment and drove off. Around midnight, I stopped at a small lookout above the ocean. The moonlight hit the water like a mirror. I leaned against the railing, listening to the waves break against the rocks, and I understood something simple. People don't really want space. They want reassurance they're still worth coming back to. I didn't know her that anymore. Before I left, I wrote another line in the notebook. She mistook my presence for possession, my warmth for weight. But someday, she'll miss the air that never asked her to breathe faster. I closed the book and looked at the horizon. The ocean kept moving, unstoppable and quiet. And for the first time in a long time, so did I. A week later, I came back to the house. Not because I wanted to see her, but because I needed to pick up the last of my things. The driveway looked the same, but something felt different. The air didn't carry that tension anymore. It was just a place now, walls, windows, and a door that no longer meant anything. She was there when I walked in. Sitting at the kitchen table, hands around a mug of coffee she probably reheated 3 times. When she looked up, her eyes said everything her words never could. She didn't expect me to actually leave. She said she didn't think I'd take it this far. I told her I didn't think she'd push me this far either. She looked down at the table, avoiding my eyes. It was strange how quiet everything was. The same silence that used to feel heavy now felt like relief. She started talking fast, the way people do when they realize they've lost control. She said she didn't mean what she said about needing space, that she just felt overwhelmed, that she needed to find herself. I told her I understood, but what she didn't realize was that space isn't just distance. It's time, and time has a way of teaching lessons comfort never could. While she spoke, I looked around the kitchen, the same one where we used to make breakfast on Sundays, laughing over burnt toast. Now it just smelled like regret. There were 2 plates on the counter, but only one ever used. The second one had turned into a habit she couldn't let go of, a placeholder for something she didn't think she'd lose. She said she missed me. Not us. Me. That word hung in the air, almost believable. But when I looked at her, I didn't see love anymore. I saw fear. Fear of being alone. Fear of realizing that space isn't comforting when no one's waiting on the other side of it. I picked up my bag, nodded once, and walked out. No anger, no goodbye, just stillness. When I reached the truck, I turned back once. She was standing in the doorway, arms wrapped around herself, like the cold had finally found her. I started the engine and drove off. That night, I wrote one line in the notebook. She wanted space. I gave her silence. Now she's learning they're not the same thing. After that day, I didn't hear from her for almost a month. No calls, no messages, nothing. The silence stretched longer than I expected, but instead of feeling empty, it started to feel peaceful. I found a small apartment near the coast, close enough to hear the ocean at night. The kind of place where no one knew my name. I spent my mornings running along the pier and my nights writing, not about her, but about the quiet that came after her. One evening, I stopped at a diner I'd found off the highway. The waitress recognized me after a few visits and stopped asking if I wanted a menu. Just poured black coffee and let me be. That night, while I was staring out the window, I saw something that made me freeze, her car pulling into the parking lot. She came in a minute later, scanning the room until her eyes landed on me. She looked different, thinner, pale, like sleep had become optional. She walked over slowly, stopping a few feet away. I figured I'd find you here, she said. I didn't invite her to sit, but she did anyway. She told me the house felt empty without me, that she couldn't focus at work, that everything she'd asked for, space, time, quiet, now felt like punishment. I listened, but I didn't respond. Not because I wanted to hurt her, but because I finally realized that not every confession deserves comfort. She asked if I'd met someone. I told her no. She looked relieved for a second, then lost again. I thought you'd wait, she said softly. That line, that quiet expectation, told me everything I needed to know. She hadn't come back for me. She'd come back to reclaim the version of me who used to orbit her world. I finished my coffee, left a few dollars on the table, and stood up. You said you needed space, I said. I just gave you what you asked for. She didn't stop me when I walked out. Maybe she finally understood what space really meant. Not distance, but absence. That night, I sat in the truck, watching the neon lights flicker on the diner's sign. I wrote in the notebook, when they say they need space, what they really mean is they need proof you'll still be there when they return. Don't give it to them. For the first time, I didn't look back. 2 weeks passed after that night at the diner, and I thought that was the end of it. But endings, I've learned, never arrive cleanly. They fade in like bad weather, slow, quiet, unavoidable. I was getting used to life without her when the first message came. It wasn't a plea or an apology, just one line. Do you ever think about me? I stared at it for a while. The kind of question that isn't really a question, it's a hook. I didn't respond. She sent another one the next morning. I can't sleep lately. Then another that night. I wish things were different. I didn't delete them. I just let them sit there, unread, like ghosts in my inbox. Because that's what she was now, a ghost that didn't know she was gone. One evening, I stopped by the beach after work. The sun was low, melting into the water, and the sound of the waves felt heavier than usual. I saw a couple walking hand in hand near the shoreline, talking quietly. They looked young, the kind of young that still believes love is enough to fix everything. I used to believe that too. When I got home, I checked my phone again. There were 3 missed calls and another message. Can we meet? Just one time. I didn't answer, but I didn't block her either. Some part of me wanted her to keep reaching into the silence, to feel how deep it had become. A few nights later, Ryan, a mutual friend, called. He said she'd been asking about me, that she wasn't doing well. She says she feels lost, he told me. I said nothing. He paused before adding, she thought you'd come back. That line stayed with me long after the call ended. She thought I'd come back, because I always did. But this time was different. She'd built her world on the idea that I'd never walk away for good, that I was dependable, predictable, safe. She never realized that safety and submission aren't the same thing. That night, I opened my notebook again. She wanted freedom. I wrote. Now she's free to realize what real emptiness feels like. And for the first time, I felt something new. Not anger, not sadness. Just detachment. The kind that doesn't fade. The kind that becomes who you are. It was a Friday night when she showed up again. I was leaving a small grocery store near my apartment, holding a brown paper bag, when I heard my name. Her voice was quieter than I remembered, almost careful, like she was afraid to wake something she'd already buried. I turned and saw her standing by the car, wrapped in a gray hoodie, hair pulled back, eyes swollen. She looked smaller somehow, like time had been taking something from her piece by piece. She said she just wanted to talk. I didn't answer. She took a step closer and said she missed me, that the house felt like a museum, full of memories no one visits anymore. I told her that's what happens when you confuse ownership with connection. She looked down, nodded once, and whispered, I know. For the first time, she didn't try to defend herself. She didn't cry or make promises. She just stood there, breathing hard, like she'd finally run out of excuses. She said she'd thought space would make her feel free, but it only made her realize how cold freedom feels when there's no one left waiting. I could tell she wanted me to say something comforting, something like, we can fix this, or, I understand. But I'd spent too long translating her half-truths into hope. So I said nothing. Silence had become my new language, and she was still learning how to listen. After a moment, she asked if I hated her. I told her no. You don't hate people who taught you what you'll never tolerate again. You just stop trying to rewrite the ending. She nodded slowly, then whispered, you really aren't coming back, are you? I said, you asked for space. I just learned how to live in it. Her lips trembled, but she didn't cry. She just whispered, I thought you'd always chase me. I told her I did, until I realized she wasn't running toward anything. She was just running from herself. We stood there for a few seconds, the streetlights buzzing above us, the world moving quietly around our silence. Then she turned and walked away, her reflection fading in the glass door of the store. That night, I drove to the beach again. I sat in the car, watching the tide pull back, and wrote one last line in my notebook. She mistook my leaving for punishment. It was mercy. Days turned into weeks after that last meeting, and I didn't see her again. But the silence she left behind wasn't heavy anymore. It was clean, like the air after a storm. I went back to work, filled the hours with simple things, and started to remember what it felt like to move through life without waiting for permission. One morning, I stopped at a Starbucks before heading to the shop. As I waited for my coffee, I saw a couple at a corner table. She was laughing at something he said, her hand resting lightly on his arm. It wasn't dramatic or loud, just effortless. And for a moment, I felt a strange peace. Not envy, not regret, just understanding. That's what real connection looks like. Two people leaning in instead of pulling away. When I got back home that evening, there was a letter taped to my door. No name on it, but I knew the handwriting. I stood there for a long time before opening it. Inside, just a single page. She said she was sorry, that she didn't know how to love without control, that she finally realized I hadn't been suffocating her. She'd been drowning in her own distance. She wrote that she still thought about me every day, that she missed my steadiness, the quiet warmth I brought into every room. Then she said something that caught me off guard. You were never the problem. You were just too still for someone who only knew how to live in noise. I folded the letter carefully and put it in the notebook with everything else. I didn't write back. There was nothing left to say. That night, I drove out to the cliffs overlooking the ocean. The sky was clear, the waves dark and restless below. I thought about how love can twist itself into something unrecognizable when one person fears peace more than pain. She once told me she needed space. What she really needed was silence, and now she had it. I sat there until the sun started to rise, painting the water in soft gold. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was running from anything. I closed my eyes and said quietly to no one, "You can't come back to what you walked away from." And that was the truth, not cruel, not bitter, just final. A few months later, I saw her again by accident. It was a quiet Sunday morning at a grocery store near the coast. I was pushing a cart down the cereal aisle when she turned the corner. No makeup, no mask of confidence, just a tired woman holding a small basket and pretending she didn't freeze when our eyes met. We both stopped. Tom didn't. I could see the panic in her expression fade into something else. Acceptance maybe, or regret. She smiled softly and said my name, almost like she was afraid to hear it out loud. I just nodded. She asked how I'd been. I told her the truth better. She smiled again, smaller this time. She said she'd been trying to figure things out. That she started therapy, quit drinking, and learned how to sit in silence without hating it. I didn't know if it was all true, but for the first time, I believed that maybe she wanted it to be. Then she said something I didn't expect. You were right, she whispered. About space. It's only peaceful when someone's still holding it for you. We stood there for a moment that felt like years. The kind of stillness where every memory plays in flashes. Laughter in the kitchen, long drives, the night she asked for space. Then her voice, trembling but steady, broke through. I wish I'd understood sooner. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Some truths don't need validation. They just need time to sink in. As she turned to leave, she hesitated, like she wanted to say something more. But she didn't. She just walked past me, her perfume barely lingering in the air before fading completely. When I got home, I sat on the porch watching the waves in the distance. I realized I didn't feel anger anymore, not even sadness. Just gratitude. Because some endings don't break you. They sharpen you. They teach you how to love without losing yourself. That night, I opened my notebook for the last time and wrote. She said she needed space. I gave her silence. And somewhere in that silence, I found myself. I closed the book, set it aside, and sat back in the quiet. It didn't feel like loneliness anymore. It felt like peace, the kind you don't share, the kind you keep. It's strange how peace sneaks up on you, quietly, without ceremony. Months passed, and life began to feel simple again. I worked, I slept, I watched the ocean from my porch. I learned to enjoy the stillness that used to make me anxious. There was no need for closure anymore, because I finally understood that some stories end long before you stop telling them. One morning, I woke up to a message from her. Just one sentence. "Thank you for walking away when I couldn't." I stared at it for a long time, unsure if I should reply. I didn't. Not out of pride, but because the story didn't need another line. It had already said everything it needed to. Later that day, I took the truck out and drove down the coastal highway. The sun was setting, that deep orange glow that turns everything gold for a few minutes before darkness takes over. I stopped at the same lookout where I'd sat months ago, when everything was breaking. Back then, the silence felt like punishment. Now, it felt like a reward. I pulled out the notebook from the glove compartment, the same one that had carried every piece of her that I couldn't say out loud. The pages were nearly full, a quiet record of everything I'd learned through leaving. I tore out the first page, the one I'd written the night I left home, and watched as the wind took it. The paper danced into the horizon until it disappeared completely. For the first time, I smiled. Not the kind of smile you force to prove you've healed, but the kind that comes when you realize you already have. She said she needed space, and in a way, she gave me the greatest gift possible. Because in giving her space, I found mine. Space to breathe, to rebuild, to remember who I was before I became a reflection of her moods. As the sun slipped behind the ocean, I whispered to myself, she wanted freedom. So did I. We just found it in different directions. When I got back in the truck, I didn't look back. The road stretched out ahead, endless, clean, quiet. I turned up the radio for the first time in months and drove toward the horizon. And somewhere between the hum of the engine and the sound of the wind through the open window, I realized this was the closure she'd never have. Because she's still searching for peace. And I already live in it. Been through it. When they crossed a line, and you made sure they felt it.